ZOS has just announced Update 46 as well as the Global Direct, which gave us so much information, including the new combat feature, Subclassing. In this video, I'm going to go over all the existing classes and their skills, and start to speculate on what some good subclassing combinations are going to be. Make sure you watch the entire video so you see the entire skill lines for each class, as well as some combinations that I think could be good for the subclassing updates. As always, if you subscribe to my channel and hit the like button, it helps me keep making videos just like this, so hit that subscribe button and let's get started. First up is the Warden. The Warden has a lot of ice skills as well as some pet skills. So the first is the Animal Companion skill line, and the ultimate ability for that is the Wild Guardian. This is that bear that, depending on the morph, can either last longer or apply a bleed damage, and it's a pretty good ultimate. It does a lot of damage. Next, we have Cutting Dive. This is a stamina ability, and you get to deal a decent amount of bleed damage immediately, and it does damage over time, so a really good dot for the Warden, and it also sets enemies off balance. Next up is Subterranean Assault. This one is those group of shocks that pops up as a ground AoE. It fires once and then 3 seconds later, it'll fire again, and this does poison damage to enemies. We also have the Fetcher Infection, which is a swarm of Fetcher flies that you unleash on your enemy, dealing magic damage over 20 seconds. This also afflicts them with minor vulnerability, which is a really good debuff to put on your enemies. We also have the Blue Betty Netch, which restores resources. It also removes negative effects, and it gives you Major Brutality and Sorcery, which are a good source of spell damage and weapon damage. Last but not least, we have Birds of Prey, which evokes a spirit of agility, so you get Major Expedition, immunity to snares, and while slotted, you get some increased damage as well. For the passives, we have Bond with Nature, which heals you when any of your animal companion skills end. Savage Beast, which while you are in combat will generate 4 ultimate. This can occur every 8 seconds. We have Flourish, which increases your magicka and stamina recovery by 12% if an animal ability is slotted. And Advanced Species, which increases your critical damage for each animal companion ability slotted. Next, we have the Green Balance Tree. So here is the Enchanted Forest ultimate ability. This is a really common healer build. Wardens make great healers, and so a lot of times healers will use this for a big burst heal. We have the Enchanted Growth, which is those little mushrooms that will heal you and your allies, and it increases your magicka and stam recovering as well. Budding Seeds, this is another fan favorite for healers. It's a ground AoE that does a lot of healing, and it has a synergy, so again, great healing skill. The Living Trellis grows vines to embrace you or the lowest health ally and heals you for over 10 seconds. And it only heals you if you take damage, and then once they disappear, you get an additional heal. We also have Lotus Blossom. This is a long overtime skill, and it increases your damage as well as healing you. You can also do Nature's Scrap, which launches a vine to an ally, healing them over time. And then the different morphs either increase it faster, healing instantly, or it can heal both you and the ally. For the passives, we have Accelerated Growth, which when you heal yourself or an ally under 40%, you gain Major Mending. Nature's Gift will restore magicka or stamina when you heal an ally. Emerald Moss increases your healing done with green balance abilities by 2% for each of them slotted. And Maturation, when you activate a heal on yourself or an ally, you grant the target minor toughness, increasing their max health by 10%. So really good healing line. These passives are very specific to the green balance for the most part, so I think an easy swap. We also have Winter's Embrace. Northern Storm, this is one of the go-to PvP ultimates if you're on a Warden. It's really good in terms of doing damage, slowing enemies down. The allies in your Northern Storm also get minor protection. Frostcloak, this is a shield. It grants you minor resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance. Winter's Revenge is a ground AoE, dealing frost damage. This is used as a damage skill, and it applies the chill status. Arctic Blast, this will heal you if you do damage to other enemies. It also is another damage over time ability, and it has the chance to chill your foes as well as stun them. Crystallized Slab is shield. So if you spin a shield of ice around you, absorbing damage from 3 projectiles. So this is probably something you would want to use if you were tanking. And then Frozen Gate, summon an ancient portal which arms after 1.5 seconds. The enemies are then teleported to you within range, and you can have up to 3 of these open at a time. So it's basically bringing enemies that are farther out to you. Glacial Presence will increase your chance to apply the chilled status, which gives more damage for the Warden if you have that ice staff. Frozen Armor increases your physical and spell resistance for each Winter's Embrace ability slotted. Icy Aura will reduce the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 15%. And Piercing Cold gives you the ability to deal frost damage, granting you Piercing Cold for 6 seconds, and increases the amount of damage you block by 12% if you have 30,000 or more max health, or increase your damage done otherwise. Now on to the Arcanist. The Arcanist is the newest class that ESO released. So let's get into it. First of all, they have the Herald of the Tome branch. The Languid Eye is the go-to damaging ultimate ability. It fires a beam down on the enemy, doing a lot of AoE damage. We also have the Writhing Rune Blades, which is a damage ability. It also grants you a Crux, so a good way to generate Crux while doing some damage. There's also the Exhausting / Pragmatic Fate Carver. One does more damage, one gives you a shield. This is the beam for the Arcanist. It's our main source of damage. It's a damage over time ability, and the more Crux you have, the more damage it does. Cephalarch's Flail. This is our main way to generate Crux. It stuns and damages enemies, and it also marks them with Abyssal Ink. You do more damage to enemies that are drenched in Abyssal Ink. Inspired Scholarship is another really great skill for damage. It doesn't matter which bar it's on, it'll give you an additional magic damage, and it generates Crux if you don't have any. So this is a great one to cast first before you have any Crux. And Fulminating Rune, again, it's another damage over time. It etches a foe, and it also pulses frost damage out to other enemies in the vicinity. There's also a synergy with this. Now for the passives, we have Fated Fortune. When you generate or consume Crux, you increase your critical damage and critical healing by 12% for 7 seconds. Harnessed Quintessence, you are restored magicka or stamina, and increase your weapon and spell damage by 5% for 10 seconds. Psychic Lesion gives you increasing damage dealt by status effects by 50% and status effect chance by 55%. Splintered Secrets increases your physical and spell penetration by a certain amount per Herald of the Tome ability slotted. Soldier of Apocrypha. This is our more shielding, tanky kind of line here. This ultimate ability is a shield, absorbing damage. Runic Sunder deals some damage here. It applies minor maim, so a debuff on the enemy, and it taunts. So this is a taunt to use if you're running a tank. The Rune Spite Ward. It's a shield that absorbs damage over time. And the first time you take damage, it will retaliate and consume a Crux to heal you. Fate Woven Armor is granting you major resolve, so increasing your armor, and it applies minor breach if you take damage, so a good source of minor breach. Runic Defense gives your group members minor resolve for 17 seconds, another armor increase, minor protection, reducing your damage taken. And then Rune of the Colorless Pool, usually 1 DD will run this. It applies Brino Brittle, increasing their damage taken by 5% and their critical damage taken by 10%. Now onto the passives here, we have Aegis of the Unseen. While you have a beneficial Soldier of the Apocrypha ability on you, you increase your armor yet again. Wellspring of the Abyss, increasing your health, magicka, and stamina recovery by 129 for every ability slotted. Circumvented Fate will give you and your group minor evasion for 20 seconds, reducing damage from areas attacks by 10% when you cast an Arcanist ability. And then Implacable Outcome is when you consume a Crux, you gain 4 ultimate. Now on to Curative Runeforms. This is the healing tree, and we have our Vitalizing Glyphic, which summons a Glyphic, and it spawns at 30% health and grows stronger the more you heal it. You give spell and weapon damage, so a buff there. Evolving Rune Man, you will heal yourself and then an ally or an ally in front of you, and it generates a Crux. Remedy Cascade. Healed, this is the beam. It will heal your allies in the path over 4.5 seconds. It also restores magicka and stamina. It's a pretty strong heal there. Pilgrim's Shields is exactly that. It grants you a damage shield for 6 seconds. It can also apply to up to 4 people in front of you instead. Xena's Empowering Disc. This is another skill that usually 1 DPS will run in a trial. It gives you minor courage, minor fortitude, minor intellect, and minor endurance if you stand in the vortex. And it lasts for up to 10 seconds after you leave the vortex. Apocryphal Gate. This is where you portal from one gate to another, so kind of like Streak here. You can either boost your speed or allow allies to portal with you based on the morph. Healing Tides. It increases your healing down by 3% for each active Crux. Hideous Clarity. When you generate Crux, you restore magicka or stam. Erudition is giving your magic and stamina recovery by 18%, and Intricate Runeforms increases the strength of your damage shields by 10%. Definitely a support line here for tanking or healing. I think if you're DPSing, this would be pretty easy to get rid of. Next up is the Sorcerer, our lightning magic caster that also has pets. First up is the Dark Magic line. The Negate Magic ultimate is definitely more of a niche ultimate. I think it comes in handy in certain situations, but isn't something that you would be using all the time. Now, the Crystal Fragments, this is one of the strongest DPS skills that the Sorcerer has, and depending on which morph you have, the Crystal Frags has a chance every time you cast an ability to have the next one turn pink and then deal more damage. In case, immobilizes enemies in front of you for 4 seconds and they're afflicted with minor maim. And then depending on the morph, you can either heal yourself and your allies or do damage to enemies. Rune Prison imprisons an enemy in a dark magic, again another stun. Once morphed, it can also add an additional stun or do damage to enemies. Dark Exchange, you bargain with darkness to restore 800 health and 36,000 magicka instantly, and an additional magic over 20 seconds. You also get Minor Berserk, increasing your damage done. It's a good DPS skill. Daedric Mines. When this mine is triggered, it deals magic damage and immobilizes the enemy for 2 seconds. Once morphed, the mines add a shield or can directly target the enemies. Unholy Knowledge reduces the cost of your non-core combat abilities by 6%. Blood Magic. When you cast a dark magic ability, you heal for a certain amount, and it scales off your max health. Persistence, after blocking, your next attack will have a reduced cost. Exploitation, when you cast dark magic ability, you increase your spell and critical rating a 20-second over time. Daedric Summoning, this has all the pets in this line, so if you don't care for the pets, then this line can go. The ultimate is the Atronach ability. This does shock damage and stuns the enemy for 3 seconds. It also applies a synergy that your allies can use, granting them Major Berserk for 10 seconds, so great damage skill. The Summoned Volatile Familiar will summon the Imp or the Clanfear depending on your morph, and is a damage over time ability. Daedric Prey boosts the damage of your pets, so it's a must-have if you're running pets on your bar, and it helps your pets target them and do more damage. It can only be active on one enemy at a time. Summon Twilight Matriarch can either heal you or do more damage. I love having my Healy Bird with me on my Sorc, especially in a trial or on a heavy attack Sorc build. Conjured Ward grants a shield for you and your pets over 6 seconds. If you don't have any pets, you just heal instead. And Bound Aegis is a pretty good shield, so it increases your block mitigation, and your max magicka is increased. You gain minor resolve and minor protection, which increases your physical and spell resistance and reduces your damage taken. Rebate will help you restore stamina when one of your non-ultimate Daedric Summoning abilities end. Power Stone reduces the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%. Daedric Protection increases your health and stamina recovery by 20% while you have this ability slotted. An Expert Summoner increases your max health by 10% if you have a permanent pet active, and increases your magicka and stam if you don't have a pet active. Next up is Storm Calling, Power Overload. This is an ulti that is pretty good in terms of DPS, essentially turns your light and heavy attacks into lightning strikes. Mage's Wrath, this is a really good execute ability. It hits a lot harder if enemies are below 20% health, and normally does lightning damage, strike on a single enemy. Hurricane is a damage over time ability. It also gives you minor expedition and increases your spell and physical resistance. The other morph can give you major expedition instead. Lightning Splash does shock damage to enemy in the area every second for 10 seconds. There's also a synergy associated with this that can damage enemies more. Crit Surge increases your damage by giving you major brutality and sorcery, which increases your weapon and spell damage for 20%, and it also heals you when you do damage. Bolt's Escape, this is the streak. This will stun enemies, and once morphed, you can either swap this out for a projectile shield or do damage and stun enemies through the streak area. Fascinator increases your mag recovery by 10% across the board. Energize increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. Amplitude increases your damage done against enemies for 1% for every 10% current health they have. And Expert Mage increases your weapon and spell damage for 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. Next up, we have the Necromancer. First up is the Gravelord skill line, which of course has the Glacial Colossus, or the other morph, which will debuff enemies. It gives them major vulnerability, which is really great for a damaging group. Ricochet Skull, this explodes doing damage and can hit up to 3 enemies in a row, dealing more damage as it hits more people. Gravelord Sacrifice, this used to be Blast Bones, this now creates a corpse and gives you damage done over time boost by 15%, so good to have still if you're DPSing. The Avid Boneyard lays down an AoE and applies minor vulnerability, increasing damage taken by 5%. There's also a synergy involved here that an ally can use, and it consumes a corpse to deal 30% more damage. Skeletal Archer will spawn similar to a pet and helps you attack and increases your weapon and spell damage, and it can attack every 2 seconds. The Detonating Siphon gives you major savagery and prophecy, increasing your weapon and spell damage, and it causes disease damage to your enemy. The Reusable Parts reduces your cost of casting skills. Death Knell increases your critical strike chance against enemies under 25% health by 10% for each ability slotted. Dismember, your spell and physical penetration are increased. Rapid Rot increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. Next up, we have the Bone Tyrant line. The Bone Goliath transformation here increases your max health, and it also restores health. Light attacks will restore your health as well, just makes you a lot tankier. Death Scythe will return health to you as you damage your enemy, and also scales off your max health. Once morphed, it can add a heal over time, or it can convert to a stamina ability and deal bleed damage. Bone Armor is just that, and it increases your physical resistance, giving you major and minor resolve. Once morphed, it can attempt to taunt your enemies and pull them in, or reduce the cost of your necro abilities. Bitter Harvest grants you 2 ultimate and gives you healing for every corpse consumed. Once morphed, it can either give you major protection, or you can gain more ultimate per corpse. The Agony Totem summons an effigy of bone at your feet, reducing your damage taken by 5%, giving you minor protection. The totem also fears nearby enemies, and there's a synergy involved for group settings. Gravegrass summons 3 patches of Skeletal Claws. The first one snares for 30 seconds, immobilizes for 4 seconds, and then stun in the final area. It also applies minor maim. Death Cleaning, you restore magic and stamina whenever an enemy dies. Disdain Harm, reduce the damage you take from damage over time abilities by 15% when your Bone Tyrant's active. Health Avarice will increase your healing received by 2% for each Bone Tyrant ability slotted. And lastly, Last Gasp will increase your maximum health. Last but not least, we have the Living Death. The ulti res is really great. You can pick up 3 allies. This is a key skill in lots of group settings. Resistant Flesh gives you minor defile, but it increases your healing to your ally in front of you, and it gives them spell and physical resistance. Expunge, you remove up to 2 negative effects, and while slotted, the cost of your abilities are reduced. Life Amid Death heals you and your allies for 712 health. This also consumes a corpse to continue healing you and your allies for 5 seconds. Spirit Guardian summons a spirit beside you. Spirit heals you or the lowest health ally every 2 seconds, and while active, 10% of the damage you take is reduced. Restoring Tether, you can siphon a corpse, and it does some healing. Once morphed, it can heal allies in a radius around you, or restore magicka and stamina while siphoning the corpse. Curative Curse, when you have a negative effect, your healing is increased by 8%. Near-death experience, your critical strike chance for all healing abilities is increased. Corpse consumption, when you consume a corpse, you generate 10 ultimate. And Undead Confederate, when you have a pet active, your magicka and stamina recovery is increased. Next up is the Templar. Templar has a lot of light skills and is known for being a really good healer. First up is the Aedric Spear. The ultimate ability, Radial Sweep. You use your Aedric Spear to cause magic damage in an AoE sweep area. Puncturing Sweep, this is another spear attack that does magic damage to the closest enemy and to all other enemies around it. Piercing Javelin, you throw your spear, dealing more magic damage here as well and knocking them back. On the morph, it could deal more damage or stun the enemy instead of knocking them back. Focused Charge deals magic damage while taunting. You can set them off balance and stun them for 3 seconds. Blazing Spear, you bring down a shower of divine wrath, dealing magic damage to enemies in the area, and it also does damage over time. Sun Shield, you can surround yourself with solar rays, dealing magic damage to nearby enemies and applying minor main. You also gain a damage shield
that absorbs damage, scaling off your max health.
Piercing Spear increases your critical damage by 10%, and your damage done to blocking players by 10%. Fear Wall, gain minor protection for 6 seconds, reducing damage taken. Burning Light, you can gain a stack, you deal damage with 3 stacks. Balanced Warrior increases your weapon and spell damage, and physical and spell resistance. Dawn's Wrath Solar Prism is a damage ultimate. It's a ground AoE, and it deals damage in an area and can stun enemies for 5 seconds.
Sunfire,
another DPS skill, does damage over time. You also gain minor savagery and minor prophecy.
Once it's morphed, it can hit 2 additional enemies, or it increases the duration of the skill. Solar Flare,
you can deal magic damage, increasing your magic done with class abilities by 5%. It also grants you Empower for 12 seconds, increasing the damage of your heavy attacks. Purifying Light is a ground AoE. It does damage, and it allows you to heal up to 200% more, to make your healing even better. Eclipse envelops an enemy in light. The first attack they do reduces their movement speed, and then they're immobilized.
Once morphed, the ability can apply to yourself, healing when you take direct damage instead, or deals damage to the attacker and anyone near them when they trigger any of the effects.
Radiant Destruction deals magic damage over 1.8 seconds and will damage more enemies under 50% health.
Once morphed, you can either heal for a percentage of the damage inflicted, or increase the amount of bonus damage dealt to low health targets. Enduring Rays
increases the duration of several of your abilities. Prism will grant you 3 ultimate when you cast one of these abilities. Illuminate gives you minor sorcery for 20 seconds and your group. And Restoring Spirit reduces the health, magic, and stamina loss of your ability by 5%. Last but not least, we have Restoring Light. The Rite of Passage ultimate will heal you and nearby allies over 4 seconds.
Once morphed, it can either increase the duration and allow you to move slowly, or you can gain major protection after casting, reducing your damage taken.
The Breath of Light is another heal.
You can heal up to 2 people, and the other morph will refund part of the ability cost used to heal an injured target.
Healing Ritual
is another heal, healing yourself and nearby allies. Once morphed, it can either give your allies minor expedition for a short duration, or you heal a single ally outside the ability's radius.
Restoring Aura grants minor endurance, minor fortitude, and minor intellect to all your group members, increasing magicka and stam recovery.
Once morphed, it can increase the radius and duration, or it no longer applies buffs to allies. Instead, you consume corpses to restore health and stamina.
Extended Ritual cleanses up to 5 harmful effects for yourself and healing nearby enemies. This also gives the Purify synergy, which is really key in a lot of trials. Channeled Focus increases your physical and spell resistance. You also gain health while standing in the rune and increases your healing done by 200%. Mending increases the healing from your skills here up to 12%. Sacred Ground, you gain minor mending when standing in your skills. Light Weaver, when you heal an ally under 50%, you gain 2 ultimate. And Master Ritualist, you can resurrect allies returning with 100% more health, and you can res a lot faster. This is a really nice passive to have in trials and other group content. Next up, we have the Nightblade. Lots of sneaky cutting skills on this class.
The first line is Assassination.
Incapacitating Strike is a great damage dealing ulti, causing them to take 20% more damage from your attacks. Concealed Weapon, you slash an enemy dealing magic damage. You can also set them off balance, and when you leave Sneak, this increases your damage done. You also gain minor expedition when slotted on your bar. Teleport Strike, you flash through the shadows and deal magic damage to an enemy, affecting them with minor vulnerability.
Once morphed, this can now deal damage in an area around you, and deals additional damage over time to enemies hit, or convert to a stamina ability to deal physical damage, and grant you Empower and minor Berserk.
Impale also deals magic damage, and it's an execute if they're below 25% health. Mark Target, you can mark a target, reducing their physical resistance and spell resistance. You can only have one marked target at a time. You also heal to full health when they die.
Once morphed, if the enemy dies, you gain Major Berserk, or the ability has a decreased duration, and you could see the target if they use stealth or invisibility.
Merciless Resolve. When slotted on either bar, you focus with lethal intent, causing your light and heavy attacks to generate a stack of Merciless Resolve, increasing your weapon and spell damage. When you have full stacks, you send a fire arrow at your enemy, dealing even more magic damage.
The Master Assassin passive will increase your physical and spell penetration against enemies you are flanking. It also increases the duration of the stun from Sneak by 100%. Executioner.
When an enemy dies within 2 seconds of being damaged by you, you restore 1000 magicka and stamina. Pressure points increases your weapon and spell damage, and hemorrhage increases your critical damage and grants you minor savagery. The Shadow Line, Consuming Darkness. Conjure a ring of shadow, reducing the movement speed of your enemies. Essentially acts like a blind ability.
Once morphed, the Major Protection can persist after leaving the area, or enemies in the area take damage over time.
Blur. You grant yourself major evasion, reducing your damage from area attacks.
Once morphed, you can either grant minor resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance, or you can grant a snare and immobilization immunity for a short duration.
Shadowy Disguise. You cloak yourself to become invisible. Your next direct damage attack will critically strike. You also increase your damage to monsters when you begin this or end this. You also gain minor prophecy and major savagery when this is slotted. Path of Darkness. You can give yourself major expedition, increasing your movement speed.
Once morphed, the path also heals you and your allies and increases their magicka and stamina recovery, or it can reduce the cost and the path affects a larger Kona area and deals damage.
Aspect of Terror. You summon a dark spirit, stunning them, and they're afflicted with minor cowardice.
Once morphed, the ability no longer has a cap of how many targets it can affect, and the fear increases in duration as the ability ranks up, or it can reduce the cost and creates a trap at your target location instead, which fears enemies when triggered.
Dark Shade. You summon a dark shade version of yourself. This will fight at your side and attacks nearby enemies, dealing magic damage.
This applies minor maim, and on this morph, the shade's attacks now hit in an area and deal increased damage. Or the other morph, the summoned shade is stationary and attacks from a range, but it costs more.
Refreshing Shadows increases your health, stamina, and magicka recovery. Shadow Barrier. You get major resolve, increasing your spell and physical resistance. Dark Vigor increases your health, and Dark Veil increases the duration of your non-invisibility-based shadow
abilities.
Next up is Siphoning.
The ultimate skill, Soul Shred,
deals magic damage.
It also has a synergy. Once morphed, it can heal for half the initial damage caused. It then tethers to enemies it hit, dealing constant damage and healing for damage caused. Or it can heal you and your allies instead of damaging and stunning enemies.
Swallow Soul. You can steal an enemy life force, dealing damage and healing yourself.
The other morph will heal additional targets.
Malevolent Offering. You can heal yourself or an ally while draining your health from yourself.
Once morphed, it can reduce the magicka cost and the duration of the health cost, or it can grant you minor mending after casting, increasing your healing done. Debilitate saps an enemy's agility, dealing magic damage over 20 seconds and reducing their movement speed, and has a chance of applying the overcharge status effect.
Siphoning attacks. Sap an enemy's agility, causing damage over time and reducing their movement speed. You can change your health to magicka or stam, and then damage will then heal you. Drain Power. If an enemy is hit, you gain major brutality and sorcery, increasing your spell and weapon damage.
Once morphed, it also heals you and your allies, or it converts to a stamina ability that deals disease damage and applies minor cowardice and grants minor courage.
Catalyst gives you 20 ultimate for drinking a potion. Magicka Flood increases your max magicka by 8%. Soul Siphoner increases your healing down by 3%. And Transfer generates 2 ultimate. We also have the Dragonknight. Lots of fiery attacks are found on this class. Ardent Flame, the Dragonknight standard, they call it battle standard, which applies major defile to anyone in the ring, reducing their healing received. You can also activate a synergy, doing damage.
Once more, they can either increase the duration, or standing in the standard increases your damage done and reduces damage taken.
The Lava Whip will strike an enemy and damage them. You can also set them off balance if they're already stunned.
Once more, if targeting off balance or immobilized enemies grants you a more powerful attack, or it can split the cost between magicka and stamina, and while slotted, your other Ardent Flame abilities increase the damage of your next Molten Whip cast and weapon and spell damage.
Searing Strike, slash an enemy with flame, dealing damage over time. They also get the burning status.
Once more, it can either heal you for a percentage of the damage done, or it converts into a stamina ability and deals poison damage that applies the poison status effect. The damage over time increases the longer the effect lasts.
Fiery Breath, you deal flame damage over time.
Once more, the affected enemies take more damage from all flame damage attacks, or it converts into a stamina ability and does poison damage, applying major breach.
Unrelenting Grip is a taunt. You can launch a fiery chain to chain enemies to you, and it also increases your movement speed. Inferno, you can activate an aura of flames, which launches a fireball healing damage over time. You also gain minor prophecy and savagery.
Once morphed, it can turn into a heal, or it can launch 3 fireballs instead of 1.
Combustion increases the damage of your burning and poison status by 40%. Warmth, when you deal direct damage, you reduce the enemy's movement speed. Searing Heat increases the damage over time of your fiery breath, Searing Strike, and Dragonknight Standard by 25%. And the World in Ruin increases the damage of your flame and poison attacks by 5%. Draconic Power, we have the Dragon Leap, which is a classic PvP skill. Sprout wings, leap on your enemy, and you can stun them.
Once morphed, it can either deal flame damage, and after leaping you gain a shield, or it can reduce the cost and increases the damage and range.
Hardened Armor is going to increase your physical and spell resistance. You gain a damage shield. Choking Talons will stun your enemies in place, affecting them with minor maim. There's also a synergy available for group members. Coagulating Blood will restore your health. You also gain Major Fortitude. Protective Plate reduces your damage taken by 50% from projectiles. Inhale, you can deal flame damage, and it also heals you for how much damage you cause.
Once morphed, it can either interrupt enemies that are casting, or the initial hit heals for more.
Iron Skin increases the amount of damage you block by 10%. Burning Heart,
when a Draconic Power ability is active, your healing received is increased by 12%.
Elder Dragon increases your health recovery for every ability slotted. And Scaled Armor increases your physical and spell resistance. Lastly, the Earthen Heart line, we have the Magma Shell. You ignite a magma lava, giving yourself a damage shell. This is a really strong shield, and it's great for tanks. The Obsidian Shard will deal flame damage. You can also heal yourself and up to 2 allies. Molten Weapons gives you major brutality and minor sorcery.
Once morphed, it can either increase the duration and the radius, or you can also gain Empower and reduces the cost as the ability ranks up.
Igneous Shield is another damage shield.
You also gain Major Mending.
Petrify, you can stun an enemy, and when the stun ends, they take damage.
Once morphed, it can either immobilize the enemy after the stun ends, or when the stun ends, you are also healed.
Ash Cloud
reduces enemy movement speed by 70% and heals you and your allies. Once morphed, it can heal for significantly more, or does damage instead of healing.
Eternal Mountain increases duration of all these abilities by 20%. Battle Roar, when you cast Ultimate, you restore health, magicka, and stamina. Mountain's Blessing,
your group can gain minor brutality for 20 seconds.
And Helping Hands, you restore stamina when you cast one of these abilities.
Now that we've reviewed all the class skills for each of the available classes, let's get into subclassing. Now, I just want to warn you, there are a little bit of spoilers here. I am going to be showing the quest that you will use to unlock subclassing in the game, so if you want to be completely surprised, now is a good time to stop the video. If you're ready to dig into it, let's get started. Well, you can speak to Bahara Al-Hunding in the city of Evermore and Bankurai to get started with subclassing. She'll go over any of the lines with you, give you a bit more information if you're unfamiliar, and then you can let her know you're ready to subclass. You will be able to do your first subclassing option for free with Bahara Al-Hunding. You could choose from any of the lines. Just note that it will cost 2 skill points for each of the lines you would like to unlock that are not from your original class. Once you've made your choices, you can confirm that you are ready to go, and that's it. You're done with subclassing. Speak to Bahara one more time to complete the quest and unlock subclassing for any future changes. Note that any future subclassing changes will cost gold, or you can use a respec scroll or any of the respec shrines to change your subclassing options. If you switch out a line, you will be refunded the skill points that you used on that line to use in another subclassing line. Now let's talk about some fun options that I brainstormed. They are by no means the most effective subclass builds, but I wanted to speculate and just see what I could come up with. But the first thing I could think of is Pets Palooza. What if you had as many pets out as you could possibly have? And so for this build, you could combine the Animal Companions line from the Warden, the Daedric Summoning line from the Sorcerer, and the Gravelord line from the Necromancer to get a lot of pets out. You could have the Bear from the Bear Ultimate, the Twilight, and the Volatile Clanfear or Imp, and then of course your Skeletor Archer or Arcanist. I think this is a really cool concept. It's going to give you additional targets for your enemies to attack rather than yourself. You could also add a companion here for some extra damage, healing, tanking, whatever. So I'm interested to see if this is something that would actually work in maybe a solo build or in content in general. If not, it's just kind of fun to have all your pets out and following you. Although hopefully people have that setting turned on so that when you're in town in front of one of the crafting boards, you aren't blocking too much of their view. Now, if you're looking for massive damage, 8 Puppies has put out a video where he combined the Assassination, Herald of the Tome, and Gravelord from the Nightblade, Arcanist, and Necromancer respectively to hit 171k, which is insane, and I don't know if this is something that is going to make it into the final version since that was week 1 of PTS, but it was pretty interesting to see how high the damage could get with this new subclassing. I also think it's an interesting combination of classes. You have the Nightblade, the Arcanist, and the Necromancer all combined to do damage, and I think it's just a really fun example of how we're going to be switching things up and combining things that we didn't think would be possible before. Another fun example of this is something I'm calling the Ice Queen. You can combine Winter's Embrace from the Warden, Herald of the Tome from the Arcanist, and Gravelord from the Necromancer. All of these lines have skills that do some kind of frost damage, and I think you could combine this with the Warden, who benefits from frost damage and having an ice staff, and this could be a potentially very interesting build. Now, I didn't parse on it or anything like that, because as I'm sure you've seen in some of the clips, I am still learning how to move around and use PC controls for this game to get on PTS, but again, I think it's an interesting concept here how you could combine poison, flame, frost, any kind of those damages and status effects, and potentially create a good DPS build. But DPS isn't the only thing that can be subclass. You can subclass a tank or a healer as well. And so an example of this is what I'm calling an unkillable tank. You can combine Earthen Heart from the Dragonknight, Daedric Summoning from the Sorcerer, or Draconic Power from the Dragonknight, and Bone Tyrant from the Necromancer. A lot of these lines have shields and buff skills on them that I think could make a really powerful tank. That Magma Shell ability ultimate on the Dragonknight is really powerful, and I think it could be combined with a lot of the other tanking lines, even maybe something from the Arcanist, to create a really powerful and shield heavy tank. You could also play around with the lines and maybe add some Gravelord skills if you want that Colossus to debuff your enemies, or some other great lines that have buff and debuffing skills to boost your group comp. I think this is going to be really interesting to see some of the tank builds that come out of this. The same goes for healers. There's some really classic healing lines that we can now combine. For example, Restoring Light from the Templar, Green Balance from the Warden, and Living Death from the Necromancer are all really powerful healing skills. The Templar and Warden are known to be basic group healers, so you can now combine that Templar line that has a lot of good passives with the Flowers and Forest from the Warden, and even throw on the Necro Res in certain situations where maybe your group needs a little extra help resing. This Necro Res is super powerful in Trials, so you could have that as an option as well and switch between the ultimates along with Barrier and Warhorn, because those aren't going away. They're from Assault and Support, which every class can have. So again, I'm really excited to see some of the healing combinations people come up with. I think this could be a really strong combination, given that it has the classic Templar and Warden combo. And then the third line you could swap out based on your situation. That's all I have for you guys in this video. I really hope you enjoyed watching and the breakdown of skills was helpful. If you have any builds that you're looking forward to making, let me know in the comments. I'm really excited to see what people are coming up with, what you're excited about. I want to give a shout out to my members. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. And to anyone who subscribed or liked the video, thank you so much. Any support really helps me out so much. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.